Looking at domestic violence in our area and the many solutions people in our community are working on right now to put an end to the abuse.
Central Florida has seen an unusually high number of deaths related to domestic violence over the last few years. Experts tell us our entry-level economy and the area's relatively young population have influenced these troubling statistics.
Too many times, documented cases of domestic violence have escalated out of control. As George Estevez reported last year, Nicolai Polynice showed signs of violence before his killing spree last September.
Carlene Pierre was very specific in the statement she wrote in the domestic violence injunction. She said, "He told me the only way he's going to leave me alone is by killing me." Chilling words that would predict the events leading up to this fiery crash, where before taking his life, Nicolai Polynice shot 3 women, killing Pierre, his estranged girlfriend, at this Quality Inn Suites off International Drive. The shooting back in September of 2012 came the day after police served Polynice with the injunction, which had been filed by Pierre 2 weeks prior. She decided to file the injunction after the Orange County Sheriff's Office says Polynice tried to run her over at work. In the injunction, Pierre was specific, saying, "I am very afraid for my life." The respondent has a long history of domestic violence against women. And we have reported many times on instances where domestic violence injunctions haven't worked. Georgetta Curry filed a domestic violence injunction against her ex-boyfriend, Christopher Gould, after accusing him of threatening to kill her and her children. She was found shot to death last August. And Jesus Morales is accused of killing his ex-girlfriend, Heidi Schellmeyer, at a DeBerry Burger King where she worked last September. Morales had just been released from jail the week before stalking her. The 38-year-old single mother had also filed an injunction. Yet the head of domestic violence shelter Harbor House is still adamant about filing these injunctions. The group helped women with about 4,000 injunctions in Orange County alone last year, but admits some abusers become unpredictable.
The likelihood that that person is not going to care about consequences anymore, which means an injunction means nothing, then you're in real danger.
George Estevez, Channel 9 Eyewitness News.
We've looked at some of the cases that gained the most attention over the last year, but the overwhelming majority of domestic violence cases you will likely never hear about. But you might be able to spot the signs of abuse. Oftentimes, violence in the home is not limited to spouses or adults. Frequently, children are caught up in the violence and the physical abuse. Our Vanessa Welch spoke to victims who experienced child abuse firsthand, and she met with local experts who are trying to help.
The abuse started when Ernestine McCrae was just 10 years old.
It was really horrifying to me when I awakened one night and hands all over my body doing things that I know should not have been done. And my first thought was someone had broken into our home.
It wasn't an intruder. It was her own father, and he continued to sexually abuse her for years. Every night, Ernestine would lie awake praying he wouldn't come into her room. He was also physically abusing her mother. For 6 long years, Ernestine was sexually abused, and her mom was beaten until she finally got the courage to stand up to her father.
My cup had just run over at that point, so I told him, I said, kill me. I say, but don't ever put your hands on her again.
The abuse stopped, but the emotional scars lingered. She never felt loved, never felt wanted, and also felt like she was her father's property.
He put the P in predator.
Experts say what happened to Ernestine and her mom is not uncommon in abusive homes. Studies show 40 to 60% of the time when there is domestic violence between adults, children in the home are also being abused.
Kids can get caught in the crossfire if mom and dad are physically fighting, and they can be accidentally hurt. They can be a target of abuse. We know that the dynamics of domestic violence are about power and control.
Marie Martinez runs the Howard Phillips Center for Children and Families, which provides counseling and other services to families at risk for abuse. She says the number of child abuse cases in Central Florida has remained steady recently, but the severity has increased, especially among babies.
You see a lot of really serious head injuries, small children thrown into a wall or shaken and either killed or nearly killed. It's pretty extreme.
Martinez and her team try to reach at-risk patients before the abuse begins. They zone in on zip codes with high numbers of abuse cases and make house visits to new parents to provide them support. The Healthy Families program has a 98% success rate at preventing abuse. But Martinez believes it takes the community coming together to make sure other children already in abusive homes get the help they need to get out.
We really depend on everyone out there who works with kids in any capacity to kind of have their eyes out and say, gosh, that child appears to have an injury that concerns me.
Harbor House, which provides shelter, education, and other services for abuse victims, concluded that total court costs for domestic violence arrests approached $9.5 million during 2011.
But when you factor in some 8,500 emergency calls that year, along with 27 homicide investigations and 3,000 plus child abuse cases, the total cost to Orange County taxpayers was an astounding $24.4 million.
Now, recently, President Barack Obama applauded the passage of the Violence Against Women Act, providing funding to help prosecute sexual assault and domestic abuse crimes.
While the federal funding should help, WFTV's Greg Wormuth learned much more is being done on the local level to end the violence.
Laura Williams knows the destruction and heartbreak domestic violence can bring. She realized she needed to get away from her daughters, Caitlin and Sarah. But the divorce only infuriated Williams' ex. And during a court-permitted visit with 2-year-old Sarah, he did something hard to imagine, even now 16 years later.
He fired 4 .45 caliber bullets into her chest, called 911 to report it, and then committed suicide while the dispatcher was on the line.
The tragedy could have destroyed Williams too, but speaking with counselors and others at her church and knowing that she needed to be there for her older daughter kept her going.
Having her to take care of gave me a reason for living.
These days, Williams advises others in abusive relationships on how to get help and be safe.
Really, the best thing that we can do is encourage them to get safety planning with Harbor House. We can encourage them to get counseling for themselves and for their children if there are children involved.
Williams and others working to protect abuse victims support the recent initiatives meant to stop the domestic violence-related killings that have plagued Central Florida. Circuit Judge Alice Blackwell, co-chair of the Orange County Domestic Violence Commission, says Central Florida has a surprisingly high number of deaths stemming from family or intimate relationships.
Partly it's that we're an entry-level economy and people who want to move to a place where they can get a job come to Central Florida. Partly it's because compared to other large metropolitan areas in Florida, we have a much younger demographic and domestic violence tends to be more prominent with younger people.
The commission is reviewing how the system serves victims and deals with those accused of the violence.
Our goal is to see where are there holes in the system that we can help fill.
The commission expects to make initial recommendations in May and then follow up with more in 6 to 9 months. But Blackwell and others maintain there are already services in place here for those who need them.
We want them to reach out for help, and there are a variety of ways to do that. Obviously, calling 911 if you're in immediate danger is the most important thing that someone can do.
There are other resources, too. There's the Domestic Violence Hotline and Harbor House here in Central Florida. Judges are on call 24 hours a day to sign domestic violence injunctions. And now, GPS devices can be placed on some perpetrators to provide another layer of protection for victims. But victims have to acknowledge the problem first.
Domestic violence isn't just hitting, pushing, slapping, or shoving. Domestic violence is about one person in an intimate relationship trying to control another person.
And often, children can become part of that struggle for control, as Williams knows all too well.
If you feel as though your abuser has the ability and the willingness to kill you, then you cannot take for granted that your children are safe as well.
Now, if we've learned anything about abuse and domestic violence, we've learned it is essential to seek out help. And there are many ways to get that help, from contacting Harbor House to accessing the court system.
If you or someone you know is caught up in a violent situation at home, we posted resources for you to get help under the 9 Family Connection tab at wftv9.com. Thanks again for watching this 9 Family Connection domestic violence special. As you've seen, it's an issue affecting us all.
We hope this sheds some light on just how serious a problem this is here in Central Florida. But you should also know that the problem is being confronted by leaders here in our community. And there are many here who can help you if you find yourself the victim of domestic violence. Thanks for watching.